Hi, my name is Mitch Russo, and this is the Photo Breakdown.
Photo Breakdown is a podcast where I talk with a photographer sharing the story of a specific photograph, technique, or business win. I'm your host, Scott Weidenkivowitz, and this is the Photo Breakdown. Let's break it down. Today, I'm sitting down with Mitch Russo to talk about a really interesting photograph that has a mixture of elements in it. And, well, let's dive into this first. Mitch, hello. Welcome to the Photo Breakdown.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be on your show. It's great to reconnect with you as well. So here I am. Let's go.
Yeah, it's been a while. So before we dive into talking about the photo, I like to ask two questions that are going to take you off guard and hopefully get the listeners to get to know you a little bit. So who has been the biggest influence in your life?
When you talk about photography, of course, right?
It could be anything you want.
Well, probably the biggest influence would be for a different reason. Well, Ron Rosenstock has been my friend and a photo mentor for many, many years. And I've learned a lot about composition and seeing from Ron. But more importantly, I've had access to the world through Ron's company. So I've been on about 30 journeys with Ron Rosenstock, traveling all over the world. And to this day, we're best of friends and planning another trip to Morocco, hopefully early next year or later this year if conditions are allow.
Nice. Great. So my second question is definitely related to photography. If you could only photograph one thing only for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a great question, Scott. And it's going to break the stereotype of what I do. So here's what I mean. There's this term that I've used, I call it privileged photography. And the reason I say it that way is because certain people have access to certain things that you and I would never have access to. So to answer your question, what I would love to be is a live stage rocks photographer.
That is definitely different than what you normally do.
Completely different. And by the way, my love of this started in the late 1970s when I was able to get backstage access to a Frank Zappa concert. Nice. And extensively photographed Frank and the Mothers of Invention with a Minolta and black and white film. And I was lucky enough, I brought a tripod onto stage.
Nice.
And I got some good time exposures of Frank moving too. So that was sort of like an explosion in my mind. Wow, if I could do this, I'd love to be able to do this like a lot, but I can't get access. No one could just walk into a rock concert with a whole bag of photography gear and tripods, right?
Yeah, it's these days it used to be that you could basically create your own press credentials and go,
right?
But now it's basically you got to know somebody to get you into that circle.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I used to photograph bands live and also their press photos years ago. When I was in bands, I was doing that, and
what did
it's always
play?
a lot of fun.
What do you play, Scott?
So I play a bunch of instruments. Not all of them I play well, but the band, I played bass in a band, I played guitar in a band, I played keyboard in a band. So I've sort of been all over the place.
Wow.
But the band that I toured with for the most part and record a lot of albums with, I was playing either keyboard or eventually rhythm guitar. I think I was even just acoustic at that point.
Wow.
But,
fun.
Yeah. It seems like ages ago. Before we dive in, this episode is sponsored by my lead generation course for photographers called More Leads, More Clients. Yes, if you would like to increase the leads you're generating on your photography site, you can use the strategies I teach in my course. Access it at scottwyden.com/leads. So let's break down this photo. What I am looking at right now is a photo of what looks like a temple, possibly. And you're going to obviously share more about this, but this is what we're looking at. And again, we'll be linking to this into the show notes. I'm looking at what looks like a temple on a beautiful night sky. There's greenery around. There's some other structure. It's got cool light on it. And there's a Buddha in the center inside of this temple-like structure. So first, where was this photographed?
In Myanmar, it was in Bagan, and
Interesting.
there are 3,000 of these temples scattered all over the area, and they're wide open. There's no admission. There's no doors. You just walk in, and particularly the time we were there, we were just about. I mean, there were photographers there, but they were snap
Mhm,
shooters. They were not folks with serious equipment and tripods. So when I arrived there, I did it with a flashlight, and I got to see this place, and I thought to myself, look at that incredible Buddha. And I went back to the car, and we had candles, and so we started placing the candles all around the Buddha. It took hours to set this up,
mhm.
but it was so much fun.
So you said there's a lot of these around. Are they all not obviously being handmade like this, they can't be identical, but are they all pretty much they look like this or they all look different?
They're all different, but
All different.
they're in this style.
Okay. So you illuminated the Buddha around the Buddha inside of this temple structure with candles, but what is also interesting is you have gorgeous blue night sky with stars. You
Mhm.
have trees that are illuminated that are green. You have trees that are, sort of reddish illuminated. So it seems like you did some sort of light painting as well. So this obviously had to have been a little bit of longer exposure. Can you share some of the,
Yep.
equipment that was involved with this?
Sure. Let me
And
let me break down the technical aspects of the photo itself. So the final photo, the last piece, was shot outside, as we the temple itself. Now, if you scroll down that page on my website, you'll see the actual Buddha inside the temple and the lighting setup, and that image is titled "At Night Alone with Buddha."
mm,
And what we did is we placed these candles all around, and what we were doing is measuring the amount of light that it would take to fully illuminate the temple and, of course, the Buddha. But once we got our first setup done, we realized that the whole back of the Buddha was completely dark. That alcove was dark. So we had to go back and put more candles behind the Buddha, which you can't see.
right.
It was on the floor. You could act now that I told you that, you could see the
Oh
shine of
yeah.
the candles,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so we were able to add some beautiful texture to the rear of that cave. And then finally, I mean, look, this took hours to set up, but the final image was then shot. And then, of course, when we shot it, the candles were already out, and we had already been packing up to leave. I turned around and saw the temple and how beautiful the temple was. And so I set up my tripod, and I started making exposures at different exposures. So I use a Sony. At the time, I was using the Sony A7R III, and what I was doing is taking several exposures based on, of course, sharpness was the key element for me. So I stopped down probably to about f8, and then at that point I got a beautiful, beautiful exposure of the sky. Then I made another one with a flashlight to illuminate the temple softly by itself. And then, of course, I brought that into Photoshop, and I blended the interior and
Mm,
the exterior together.
nice. Yeah, the sky also just pops off that, off the background of the sky.
Yeah,
The temple does. It just definitely has that the detail, the contrast, the luminance, to make it all pop. What is the structure on the right? Is that another temple of sorts?
it is. And it's far larger, and it posed a problem too. My goal was to try and make it secondary to the main image, but it was there was a lot of stray light on it, so it took a little bit of processing to sort of just basically tone it down, but
Mhm.
still keep some of the detail in that beautiful stonework. So
Yeah, yeah, you can tell, and like, especially the bottom of it, you can
yeah,
see where it's brighter. You can see how much there is going on in the stones.
yes,
I
exactly.
mean, even the temple with the Buddha. I mean, there's so many little intricate details in that architecture. It's
Mm,
gorgeous.
it is. It is. You should go, Scott. You would love it.
Oh, I'm sure it would.
If we could ever travel again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah. So, did you consider photographing this in portrait instead of landscape to get rid of that other
I did.
temple?
I
You
did
did.
photo.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't like it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it did not work for me. First of all, it looked too isolated that way, and second of all, I don't generally like vertical images. They're hard to display, and they don't work well. I don't think they work well for me when I'm showing my photos. So if I'm in, like for example, if I speak at events, or I used to, and I'll do a slideshow, and the verticals are they just like over the top of the stage, you know what I mean? They're just not,
Right.
or you have to make the screen so small. So
Right.
I prefer, if possible, to continuously to use horizontal. Now I do, when I create HDR panos at night, I do of course shoot vertical and then
Hmm.
stack them into a horizontal image.
Yep. Yeah, definitely a good method to do for those for sure.
Yeah.
So this was purely, just to confirm, this was purely a multiple exposure with masking and blending rather than a pure HDR. It was more of a fine tune with masks.
Yes, because
Okay.
the HDR, even if you were doing three stops on either side, could not have handled the contrast.
Hmm.
But the other problem, as I disclosed earlier, we had already blown out the candles when I realized how
Yeah.
beautiful the temple was. So yeah, I didn't want to go back and relight all the candles. So
Yeah.
but the blending part was relatively easy. I mean,
Mhm.
again, Photoshop. I'm not very adept at Photoshop, but even I could do this in Photoshop. So it wasn't hard at all.
Yeah, and if you have a camera on a tripod, it definitely makes that process way simpler because you don't have to align everything up. It
Exactly.
just there. What I find most interesting in this is that just from a architectural standpoint in the photograph is
Hmm.
that it looks small, right?
Right.
But if you do look at that photo that you also have in the same gallery of just the Buddha, it's big.
It is big. Yes, sir. It is big.
So it's just it's gorgeous. This photo is gorgeous. The temple is gorgeous. It's just so cool, especially when you put them side by side. The you get so you've got basically two photos, one showing the scale just because it's from the inside and you can see simply how big it really is. So it's really, really, really cool. Yeah. So thank you so much for breaking down this photo with me. So one last question is, what should I have asked you but didn't?
You should have asked me what the hell are those wires doing to on the left side of the frame.
But that requires wanting to take it out in Photoshop, and
Yeah,
not everybody wants to.
yeah. My basic philosophy is clarity,
Mhm.
and I have to say I think I could have done that with ease, and I
Probably, but
and I and I didn't, and I think I can and should go back and clean this up just a little bit more. But
But at the
mhm.
same time, leaving them in there shows ancient and modern times together.
Right, but most people don't like they don't I don't think most people make the connection. But you're right. I mean, there's no doubt about it. When I look at a photo, at least from my photographer's eye, I'm looking to take something of pristine beauty and isolate it in its native area, which is what this is. I have isolated this in its native area using lighting and setup. And to me, and secondarily looking at this, the wires to me subtract from the overall performance of that image. And
Mhm.
like I said, I don't think it's hard to fix, but I noticed it while we're talking more than ever before.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, so you go back to it, it'll probably
Yeah,
take you like 10 minutes, 5, 10 minutes to get rid of
exactly.
and done.
Yep,
Um,
exactly, exactly.
cool. So
Yeah.
where can our listeners connect with you online?
Well, they can go to mitchrussotravels.com. Right now, that site is basically bouncing directly to my Smug Mug gallery because we're working on a beautiful brand new site as we speak.
Great. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. Your business website, your outside of photography is is quite beautiful. So I can imagine that your new photography site is going to be equally as awesome.
It will be incredible. And I got to tell you, I've been building websites with the same partner now for over a decade, and he's built all of my sites. I have 4 or 5 different business sites promoting different services and products of mine. So, and he's basically built them all, and it's ridiculous how much I love this guy and the work he does. So you're right. It's
Awesome.
going to be awesome. It's going to be epic when it comes out.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. Thanks.
So thank you for listening to Photo Breakdown. For the show notes and to see the photo that Mitch shared today, visit photobreakdown.com.